Hi everybody and welcome to the second edition of LoLa MC, the London Latin Music Conference. We're going to begin the day with a discussion on Latin music in the UK post-COVID. For all of us working in the sector, our working lives have been hugely affected by the virus and the response to it. And what we've done with this opening panel is to bring together professionals from outside the Latin music sector, although some of them have a lot of experience within Latin music. And this is people from UK Music, the Music Venues Trust and the Greater London Authority to discuss the changes going on in the wider musical world and how these are affecting all of us. But first I wanted to begin with Ernesto Marichales, a musician on the London scene, to reflect on the impact that COVID has had on his working life. Ernesto?
Yes, hello. Well, thank you for the invitation, and yeah, I'm gonna try to say what has been going on with the COVID and musicians in London. I'm a Latin American musician, but also I would like to say how it's been affecting us. Well, I think in the whole world, but particularly in the UK. First of all, thanks, Andy, for being always supportive with our culture, our music, and our artists. That is an important thing to say. In my case, my particular case, it's been like I used to have 3 Mayfair residencies, 1 West End show, and this year has been cancelled, 1 world tour for me and 1 UK and European tour, plus no recordings and no sessions. Just some couple of festivals that they have been postponed or cancelled, so we had to record something and send it. And this is the kind of work that we have been doing, or recording remotely at home, which is more work because you have to record, edit, produce the whole thing, and then it's also you know, less money. So basically the concern is what is going to happen in the future. And you know, I was reading just last night, I think an article made for Encore musicians that is saying like 65% of musicians, British musicians in the UK, they are very likely to stop making music, which is going to be a very, very, very heavy impact if that happens in the cultural and economic you know, scene in the UK. So that's the little introduction that I can give you as a musician. You know, that what has been happening to me.
Yeah, thanks, Ernesto. Tom Keel from UK Music. I mean, a familiar story everywhere, I guess.
Yes, and I think if it's helpful for me to sort of give you a bit of an overview as to who UK Music is, just in terms of the wider music industry. We're basically an umbrella organisation representing all the various component strands to the sector. That is the recorded sector, the publishing sector, the creators sector, the collecting societies, and the live sector too. So the impact of the pandemic that it's had on the music industry as a whole has been a very devastating, and in particular, of course, to the live sector, which is fundamentally since effectively the 16th of March and continuing has been on lockdown. The government has a roadmap now that it is putting in place to kind of bring in activities, but we're only really at stage 4 of that roadmap, and that there's a big question mark as to when you get to stage 5, and I'm sure Mark, who's been doing some fantastic work with Music Venue Trust over the recent months as well, will go into a bit more detail on that. But I think it's absolutely right, and Ernesto's right. I mean, there's a very deep concern within the music industry that we're going to lose some very good and talented people, both from front of house, from a performing level, but also from a back room and a business side of things too, to the pandemic. music and creative industries can be seen as risky businesses anyway in normal times, and that to have something like a juggernaut like this happening within the sector puts the challenges even more starkly into relief. The government, at least on official level, has been working with the sector very, very well. They have been talking to us and engaging with us throughout the pandemic. What the government has been slow in coming is actually coming with tailored sector support. They did eventually come forward with that in the form of the 1.5 billion funding package in July, and that has had and that is continuing to have some impact in terms of applications which are going from the music industry. We had concerns initially that maybe it would be quite narrowly drawn, but I think that the application process was sufficiently wide enough to ensure that organisations could continue to benefit from that. I think one of the big problems we're going to face in the next coming months, which is a particular priority for UK music, is ensuring that that the support provisions for individuals which have been put in place, such as the furloughing scheme, which is impacting the business side, those who employ people within the music industry, but also the self-employed packages. Both of those are due to end in October, with no guarantee at the moment there's going to be something to replace that with. So we are putting pressure on the government and ministers in order to ensure that there is some, for a sector like music and the live sector, where it's just fundamentally going to be very difficult for it to consider a short-term reopening, particularly on the scale that it has had previously. We're putting pressure on the government in order to unlock some of that and hopefully come up with some kind of scheme which can see some bit of support continue for sectors which can't no longer reopen. But music industry has continued to grow. Live has been for a number of years the fastest growing part of the sector, and it's we are a growth story. And if you think about things like Brexit and the world that we want to present ourselves in after that, music and the creative industries need to be fundamentally part of what the UK is and how we market and present ourselves across the world. And so we need to quite firmly put some emphasis on that and ensure that these very key parts of our sector are continue to be protected and maintained to be protected in the coming years ahead, as we kind of get through this pandemic and get back to a form of recovery and revival.
Yeah, very much, Tom. And Amy, from a specific London perspective as the Nights are.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Andy, for inviting me to be a part of this. I guess, Tom's kicked off with a little description of what UK Music does. I'll maybe just put my role into context as well. So my role as Night Czar is to make sure that the capital works for everyone at night, whether you're working, whether you're studying, whether you're out enjoying yourself, whether you're out shopping, looking after your children, whatever it is. We know that London's economy doesn't stop at 6 p.m. My background is in running club nights, and I'm a woman who has always worked at night for over 25 years. So I've got a lot of frontline experience of what it means to be out and about and working and earning a living at night. Most other night czars, or night mayors as they're sometimes called around the world, really tend to focus on bars and pubs and clubs. But in London, we've taken a different approach. We focus on everything that happens between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. It's this kind of ecosystem approach. And we know that the economy at night plays a huge role in the capital's success. It employs a third of the capital's workforce, contributes billions to our economy. And before COVID, the economy at night was growing faster than the economy during the day. And that's one of the reasons why the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, appointed me in 2016, because he's realized that it's really important that we plan for London at night. And so I stand up for the 1.6 million Londoners who work evenings and nights and have to face all of the pressures of rising rates and rents and increased development. And I bring businesses, local authorities, Londoners and workers together to find balanced and sustainable solutions for our life at night. So that's my role in a nutshell. But moving on to the impact that COVID has had. Well, no one could have ever planned for this, and we know that our music venues, our clubs, our bars, our pubs, and our artists make a huge contribution to life in our capital. But a lot of businesses are facing permanent closure because of coronavirus. It's had a devastating impact on our culture and nightlife, with incomes collapsing overnight. And it's important to note that by closing their doors, music venues, pubs and bars and have really played their part in tackling this health crisis. And so it's only right that we should be giving them support now and in the future. We've got huge challenges ahead. I mean, Tom, touched on some of those. We know that the creative industries are facing a projected loss of 16% of its creative jobs here in London, and a 25% drop in GVA, so in creative industries GVA. That equals 14.6 billion pounds. I mean, it's really hefty. And, Ernesto gave us a very personal view of this. If we look at it from a macro view, the way that this is impacting our city is massive. We've seen, thousands of businesses in hospitality and culture who've been able to reopen, say from the 4th of July. And we now have the go-ahead from government to, have live performance take place indoors. And while this is welcome news, I think so many businesses are still really concerned about the viability and about their ability to actually make enough money to pay the artists that are on stage and to pay the rest of their staff. So it's important that the businesses get support that they need to maintain social distancing, whether that's around queuing, seating areas, wider health and hygiene protection. This is for, staff as well as customers. So it's important that we don't lose sight of the people that are behind the scenes making all of this work as well. So to know if that gives you a little overview that you were hoping for, Andy.
Yeah, thanks very much, Amy. So Mark David from the Music Venues Trust, welcome.
Hi Andy, how are you? I should probably say, first of all, well done for running this conference. I mean, me and Andy have known each other for a number of years. My background is actually in the management of Latin alternative music artists, so I know a fair bit about the sector. A quick overview: Music Venue Trust is a representative organisation. We're a registered charity. We represent around about 900 now grassroots music venues right across the UK. Those venues are obviously very badly impacted by COVID-19. They haven't really been able to open in anything like the normal model of what they're doing. I'll run you through the process. They actually were told to close on the 20th of March, but by the time they were told to close, business had already collapsed, frankly. We were already reporting to government that an 80% downturn in attendance at venues by the time the government finally acted to say that they weren't allowed to be open. We actually, anecdotally, we had one particular gig where 250 tickets for a sold out gig were taking place on the Friday, and not one member of the audience actually turned up. So business was already completely collapsed before government actually acted. After that happened, we worked very closely with UK Music. We worked extremely closely with Mayor of London's team through Amy on what these venues would need to survive this crisis. And we've had a large number of successes thanks to that support we've had. In London particularly, we've enjoyed an intervention fund, frankly, a cultural fund that is enabling us to support venues in London to avoid permanent closure. And we've already interceded in nearly 100 cases now of venues that were under permanent threat of closure. And so far in London, and I must touch all the wood I can see around me in the 100 Club, we don't actually have any that have permanently closed yet. We have a huge number that are under threat. And that picture is reflected across the country. One of the things that we've done as an organization is to deliver a huge package of evidence about what was happening to the venues themselves, but to pick up to Ernesto's point, what that means for musicians, for crew, for songwriters, for everybody else. This is like the factories being closed down where everybody works. It's the closure of the research and development departments. It's the closure of where people not only perform, that's one part of their business, but also build their business up, so they're losing their future. It's where they do other activities. They go to meet people, that's gone. They go to meet other bands, that's gone. They go to sell their merchandise, that's also gone. So what we've seen is a massive collapse in income right the way across the sector. Our concern as an organization is to make sure that that infrastructure returns at some point. So to pick up on what Tom was saying, the government had a five-step roadmap, a route back to full reopening. We actually only had a three-step roadmap, which we proposed rather sarcastically in response, which was give us some proper public health advice, give us the money and let us get on with it. They weren't very keen on that, unfortunately, but their own roadmap, we are now at stage 4 of that as of the 15th of August. Unfortunately, what that practically means is 11.2% of all the venues in the country are now open, frankly, still not really making any money, going for socially distanced audiences that they don't have a viable economic model. What we are, however, seeing is now that's happened, and looking at the kind of tailing off of the support that's going to be available for our whole ecosystem that Tom was describing there, you know, the ending of the furlough scheme, the end of the SEIS for self-employed, the fact that it didn't actually support, and we know particularly in the Latin community, didn't support the vast majority of musicians anyway, they've fallen through the cracks. What you're now seeing in our sector, which is very connected to the musicians, very connected to the community of music around them, they are concerned that people like Ernesto need to get back to work. And they are starting to think, okay, what can we do rather than what can we not do? So we're carrying out a survey right now. We'll have the full results next week. But our initial responses is that 45% of the sector is now planning to open in October in very limited formats. Another 18% would consider it. And by the end of September, 13% are thinking about being opening. So October looks like the key date at which it might change for people like Ernesto. We may see things coming back. Therefore, the big challenge for us is who's going to pay for that? Because we've seen the Eat Out to Help Out scheme support restaurants where they couldn't serve enough people to really make it work. We're going to need something like that from public funding, brands or sponsorships, because there just isn't the money. We're operating at 31% capacity under stage 4. I'm part of the venues working group that looking at what stage 5 might be. And I'm one of the members of that venues working group suggesting that stage 4 probably needs to have a stage 4.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, building towards stage 5, which also needs to have a series of steps within it, because it isn't really sensible for us to just stick at 31% capacity all the way through until stage 5, which practically at full capacity probably means waiting for a vaccine. So the things that we're working on with partners is things like ventilation. What impact does that have? Things like masks, viral protection masks, additional solutioning, misting, tracking, testing, all these things. We want to see government recognize that these are things that might mitigate the risk and might mean that capacities could gradually creep up. And as those capacities creep up, maybe the public funding and the branding and sponsorship could go down. So, you know, we want to get back to being a commercial sector that sells tickets to see artists that people want to see, and the artists, you know, that's what people have always done in our sector. But we're going to need some public support, and that's what we're working on at the moment, while working on how do we open.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. That's really good. So, in terms of a possible timetable, then the hope is that things do begin to open up again in October. I guess it all depends on the wider health position and local advice and so on as well. But I mean, what's the longer roadmap? Do any of you suppose, in terms of you know, do we get back to the old normal at some point? I mean, speaking as a promoter, when this first happened, we moved all of our shows from April, May to September, October. We then moved all the shows from September, October to April, May next year. And then as we begin to talk about setting up new shows, agents say to me, well, is it the same deal as before? And I have no idea. You know, because it's as a promoter, you're used to always working with things that are beyond your control. But then to have this other whole dimension that's completely beyond our control, it just makes planning impossible. But I mean, just taking Mark's point about what the overall length of time for opening up might be in a best case or in a worst case. I mean, how did the rest of you see this?
I wish I had a crystal ball where I could give you that kind of outcome. And I think Mark's articulated it very well, really. I think it does seem that stage 5 of the roadmap is conditional on that kind of vaccine relationship. And I think that is kind of key, I think, to consumer confidence as well. Unfortunately, I think that is almost kind of embedded. I think that if you're thinking about getting back to a return to the old normal, as we may need to call it, I think you're going to be kind of looking at that. I'm attracted though to what Mark said about the needing to be that kind of incremental phase. I mean, to think kind of clearly we're at stage 4 and that's kind of the limits of where we can go would be very depressing. We kind of need to kind of look at if there are within the scope of the government's roadmap of stage 4, where there are kind of further things that we can do to kind of bring that more activities. And I think Mark's right about the kind of eat out to help out type scheme. That we'll need some kind of incentives to get people back to increase confidence as well. This is a sector which has been incredibly popular. People will still want to go to gigs. I don't doubt that there will be an appetite for it. It will just be that you just need to nudge people a bit further, I think, you'll get to think, well, this is, and you need to get public people going to gigs and having that kind of campaign element behind it, really, in order to bring back that confidence and to ensure that people see that as a pastime and activity that people are confident to do again. But I think that we need to work as a sector together in order to, and with government and the authorities to get the measures in place that we can get as much in as possible before then.
I think we have a real issue around confidence because, you know, within the industry, you know, again and again for every sector, we've asked the government for, you know, 2 weeks notice, 3 weeks notice before our sector is allowed to reopen, and to have clear guidelines and guidance. And every step of the way, it seems like it's come a day or two, or, you know, maybe 3 or 4 days before we were meant to reopen. And, you know, this does not enable the sector to flourish well when it does reopen. We have an opportunity here to plan and to plan well, but we need clear indication from the government. I mean, at the moment, I'm really working on lobbying the government around nightclubs. Nightclubs are still not allowed to reopen. We have a huge number of unlicensed music events that are going on every weekend, draining our police resources and potentially increasing COVID infection. This could be solved by giving us a reopening date and a roadmap for reopening nightclubs. But we don't have any indication from the government about that at the moment. And that's the frustrating bit, is that I think the sector has so, you know, we are so resilient. We are so creative. We are so full of ideas and energy, even in the face of all of these difficulties. But we do need help, and we need guidance, and we need money to make it happen. So I think we really need the government to step up with this.
I just jump in there and just say culture and creativity will happen. That's the nature of it. You know, the nature of it is that we are a very creative sector. We're very driven and passionate, and we want things to happen. And the solution to controlling an epidemic like this and controlling public health is not to ban everything and prevent everything and fail to provide guidance and fail to provide support, because you get exactly the activity that Amy's just described there. We're dealing with breakouts right across the whole country of illegal, frankly dangerous, criminal activity organized by completely unlicensed. And you know, I'll put my foot down. £10,000 fine for organising an illegal rave with 3,000 people going to it. Frankly, if I was a promoter, I would have put it on the ticket. Includes a £3 charge for the fine that I'm going to have to pay. I mean, it's utterly absurd. You know, a license variation in London would cost you £10,000 in court fees. Fining somebody £10,000 under a supposed new legislation when the legislation already exists is completely ridiculous. I think that what we feel very strongly, and I think it's important in this conversation to talk about, I don't know Ernesto's work, particularly Ernesto, but I know the Latin sector very well. I know that generally speaking, you're looking at larger groups of performers. You know, you're actually looking at, you're not looking at a two-piece band, you're looking at 12, 15, even 20 people on stage. You know, that's one of the things that I love about Latin music, you know, and actually there has been some progress on this. When the government first came to us, they were talking about the dangers of singing and woodwind and brass. And at one point there was, believe it or not, a suggestion that all singers and woodwind and brass would need to be 6 meters away from each other. Oh my God. 6 meters away from the audience. And at which point I just thought, well,
you'd be in the road outside.
I mean, both me and Amy are Amy's in the Dublin Castle as a backdrop, and I'm in the 100 Club. I think you'd struggle to get the band in, let alone get the audience in. You know, but we did go back and we kept testing that, and we kept saying, well, look, wait. You know, what's that for? And eventually it kind of crumbled. And first of all, it went down to, it would need to be 3 meters. And now actually in the latest guidance, we have 1 meter plus social distancing expected on stage unless you're in a professional bubble. So actually there are changes, and they are positive. And we are now able to put some musicians on stage and get some people in front of them. But the problems that Amy describes there, I would say, are the way that nightclubs are currently being treated is indicative of a number of other problems we're seeing. So let's pull some out as examples. Why can you sit next to somebody on an aircraft? Because this is the reason: it changes the air 12 times an hour. That's the official government response. I pointed out that at the Phoenix Artist Bar in Soho, the air is changed 20 times an hour. So is it okay for the Phoenix Artist Bar to put everybody sat next to each other? Answer, no. We would like some consistency around these things. If it's okay for under 18s to all go and sit together at school and then dance and hug around each other in the playground, why can't every single music venue in England do an under 18 show? If under 18s are not at risk, then why don't we do some cultural activity with them? So I really think there's some weak spots in the government positions here where consistency between different sectors would really, really help. This is a sector that's incredibly good at managing risk. We're experts at it. You know, Andy, you know, when you do a health and safety risk assessment for every show that you put on, you know exactly what your risks are. We should take much more of that approach on it. We need to be saying, right, in my venue, these are the risks. This is the risk from COVID. This is what I can do about it. Now, what is my capacity? Not, okay, doesn't matter what you do, or you can only get 31% of people in, just deal with that. That doesn't work. And certainly not, wait a minute, there's a risk that people might enjoy themselves in a nightclub, so that's banned. Because that just doesn't work.
Mm.
A little bit rescuing a little bit of Mark and Amy, and the coherence of the government. Like, we always see, we artists and people, we always see culture like, oh yes, this is a weak, it's the little weak part of the thing that everyone has to help. And the reality of it is like, it's not culture. It's gonna be happening, and it's the only thing that survives. You know, more than currency, more than governments, and more even than countries. The culture will survive, and we always be playing and doing the things. So I think it's important to, I think what Mark was saying right now, to make the government see, like, I live in Hornsey and I go down green lanes to eat some Turkish thing, and with the eat out, and that's why I think Mark said that the eat out thing for the music, it would be amazing, something like that, obviously. But I go and no one there is respecting the 2 meters thing, and the places have a queue that they look like Cuba or Venezuela when you go and buy chicken, you know, like it's like 2 kilometers queue, you know. It's crazy. I've never seen so many people in the streets, and I'm not like, you know, I'm not like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get COVID or whatever. But if you're in a pandemic, so I mean, it's not coherent. And I think that one of the key points is what Mark just said now, like trying to try them to see the reality of the numbers, the meters, and at the end, if you really research and if you really read what the whole medical worldwide medical people is saying, it's like, for real, that like in reality, everyone is going to get the virus, you know. And I'm not saying like, oh yeah, but no, this is an excuse. I'm not saying like, let's go crazy and do, no, I'm not like that. But I'm just saying like, we need to like try to make them see that art is also as important as big business. Because what I feel, I don't know if it's like that, what I feel is like this, the help, economic help comes like, it's like a big rain where the big places are here, big venues, producers, blah blah blah, and then at the end is there like the crew, the artists, and then the whole is a waterfall that comes here and then drops here, less drops here, and then obviously it's also time, so they get it first and then they get it last. You know, I think it's very important when Mark, you said like about the currents, and we have, in a way, we are responsible of make them see that, I think.
Ernesto, I think you make some really good points there, and the issue around the consistency in particular is really important, because that's been lacking, and I think that that's why there isn't much confidence either, you know, to go out, and that's something we really have to build. I just wanted to touch on the point you said about the worth of culture and how it survives everything, you know, whatever challenges can be thrown at it. And I just wanted to reassure you and anyone else who may be watching that the Mayor of London takes culture really seriously. And Mark, David touched on it earlier around the £2.3 million emergency fund that the mayor has set up for the most at-risk small cultural businesses that are operating within the culture and creative industry. And that includes LGBTQ plus venues, it includes grassroots live music venues, it includes creative tenants in creative workspaces, and independent cinemas. And we have a culture at risk office at City Hall. So we're working day in, day out to support venues that are suffering in this way. We've supported over 750 cultural spaces and businesses over the past few months. I mean, overnight, every bit of culture became culture at risk. And some have been able to get more support than others. So what we're trying to do at City Hall is make sure that those that fall through the government cracks get the support they need from us at City Hall. So we've launched the Pay It Forward scheme, which means businesses can offer customers the option to buy goods and services. So like you could buy a round of drinks or buy a ticket for a gig in advance and claim on it in the future. And the mayor's match funded this. So if you were, say, to buy a ticket for a venue at some point in the future for 10 quid, the mayor would match that. And so we've been able to help businesses up to sort of boost their income up to $5,000. We also have the Growth Hub. So if anyone watching would need one-on-one targeted individual business support, you can book in for an hour's business consultation with our Growth Hub. And this includes every cultural business. And I'd really encourage you to take advantage of that. That is something that the mayor offers, and we're really proud of that. We're really boosting the all of the resources that are going into the Growth Hub. So there'll be more advisors, and we're able to help guide you and make sure that you're getting all the support that you're entitled to, and understanding how we might be able to help bridge the gaps.
Thanks.
I'll just pick up on one thing that that Ernesto said that kind of rung true with me as well. I think the key to opening up, I think, and persuading government, it's about focusing. The key things of where they have actually done things and actually have opened up. It's all about the economics and showing the value there and what comes back to the exchequer, whether it's a restaurant, filling a plane for the people or whatever. It's clear that the economic, but there's also the societal issues as well, whether it's education, and that's where the government is firmly prioritising. It's where there's a societal harm or an economic harm that I think it will come about. And I think what we as a sector need to do, and we have been doing, but we need to do, I think, far more so and more strongly and more vocally, is to highlight explicitly the economic and the societal harm of music, creative and cultural activities not happening, and what damage that is actually doing. And I think if we emphasize that far more and more persuasively, then I think we will get more traction in getting things maybe opened earlier than we or more support to enable us to do more activities than we perhaps are facing at present.
We touched on one of the specifics there about the size of ensembles with Latin bands. Obviously, one of the other key things to the sector is social dancing, salsa dancing, couple dancing. I mean, what is the future for that within clubs, within the opening up process? The idea of being able to go to a club and dance with a number of different partners where there's physical contact.
Well, that's not allowed at the moment. You're not allowed to dance. Dancing is currently considered to be a dangerous activity. So's laughing, so that's a bit weird, isn't it? Singing is also considered to be a dangerous activity. I mean, somebody asked me, and government actually asked me about this, and they were talking about our ability to reopen. And I did say at one point, well, sorry, your list of dangerous activities is being in an enclosed space, being close to each other, singing and dancing. Can you explain to me what you think the live music experience is? Because that does seem to be all of it, as far as I can tell. I don't go to gigs to sit far apart from somebody sat down doing maths. That's because I don't like progressive rock. But the issue really is that, you know, especially in the Latin community, like, music is to be enjoyed and engaged with. It's a highly sociable activity. Ali at the Clapham Grand pointed out really, really early on in this whole thing. He said to me, "Oh, one of the problems we've got is that they keep going on about social distancing. Social distancing being the thing that you want to do. They mean physical distancing is what they want. They want physical distancing. Those are two quite different things, actually. The idea that you would go to a gig to be socially distanced from the other people that are there is frankly ludicrous. That's the main reason why you've gone. I mean, I certainly do not go and see idols so that I will stand quietly in a corner on my own, having a quiet drink and being economically active. To pick up on what Tom said, though, I completely agree. And it's one of the things that I think UK music are particularly good at, is framing the way that a lot of us feel very passionately about something, and then providing the kind of economic framework on what that means. And I mean, from work that we've done with them, here's a really important stat of what's happening. When you spend £10 on a grassroots music venue ticket, our stats indicate you spend £17 elsewhere in the nighttime economy. And that means in other bars, in restaurants, on your transport getting there. So of every £10 that's going on your ticket, £17 is going on elsewhere. The failure to have cultural events, the failure to be able to get people up and singing and dancing together and everything else is having a massive impact on other parts of the nighttime economy. And we're seeing that in public transport. We're seeing that for the taxi firms. We're certainly seeing it in pubs, believe it or not. A large number of the pubs in cities particularly are reporting that even though they're open, they're trading at massively below where they would normally be, because there's no reason to leave your house. You can't to come back to what you just said, Andy, you can't go and do the things that you would leave your house to go and do. You're not allowed to go and dance with somebody. You're not allowed to go and sing with people. So actually you don't have what we would call the instigator of your nighttime economy behavior. Your nighttime economy behavior has a number of economic things that all of these things are like a set of dominoes falling together. What Tom's describing there is, well, okay, the figure's £17 that's not going to be spent in the nighttime economy if £10 isn't spent on the grassroots music venue activity. I always call this the kebab problem, and both Tom and Amy have heard me say this before. I've eaten a lot of kebabs. I've never left my house at 11 o'clock to go to a kebab shop and buy a kebab. That's never happened. But I've eaten a lot of kebabs at about 11:30 after I've fallen out of the gig. So who's suffering from the fact that music venues aren't open? Well, my favourite kebab shop in the whole of London is the Marathon Kebab Shop opposite the Roundhouse. An absolutely fantastic service. They only take cash, and I like them in there. They're open till 4 o'clock or something in the morning. Everybody goes there after the gig, and we carry on singing and dancing. It's empty. Why would you go to the Marathon? Nobody's leaving their house at 11:30 to go and sit quietly in the Marathon Kebab Shop and eat kebabs. I feel really sorry for them. We need to, if nothing else, we need to bring back gigs so we keep places like the Marathon Kebab Shop going. That's the issue. You know, we need this social activity to spark all the other activity that our economy at nighttime relies on.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about the geography of London now as we get into different phases, because it sort of seems to me various things. As you say, Mark, in terms of people going to gigs in London, it's always seemed to me as a promoter that with most artists, it doesn't particularly matter which day of the week you put them on in London. It could be a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because there's an audience that's out. There's an audience that's probably gone to work somewhere in central London, will go and grab something to eat, and then will turn up at your gig at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Now, without an audience traveling around London, you know, I'm just wondering going forwards when live shows do begin to open up, whether if you no longer have a monthly season ticket and you're working from home in Woodford Green or somewhere, whether you're actually going to finish work early and head across London to go and see a show, how that's going to happen. But also just thinking of it from the point of view of the Latin American communities in London, which historically have been in sort of certain central London areas like Elephant and Castle, Brixton, Seven Sisters. You know, what is happening now is obviously people, to the extent that they are going out, are tending to go out in localized areas. So there's an advantage as well as a disadvantage, but it's, again, the crystal ball that we've all given up looking into. It's just impossible to know whether these changes are long lasting, or whether people will go back to work in central London in big numbers, or whether this will be a kind of huge sea change adaptation to things that will last a number of years, if not for forever.
Sorry,
go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
I mean, I think we do have to accept a degree of behaviour change with what's going on. I think it's inevitable with something like this has had so globally far-reaching consequences that the people will behave in a different way. But what I would say is the music industry has historically been very incredibly nimble and being able to adapt to changing circumstances and new environments. And I think that given that, providing we retain the talented people, the workforce, that dedication, I think there's we can adapt practices in order to cater for changing behaviours that consumers might develop. I think that's kind of how I would see it. Amy.
I just wanted to say just about this idea of working from home and everything, and I think that there've been a heck of a lot of people who've carried on working through this pandemic and have not had the luxury of working at home, and have had to go out and to work every day. And I think that, you know, the government really just focusing on a very small sector of people that are able to work from home, you know, that are office based and have that kind of 9-to-5 existence, isn't really fully capturing the diversity of the workforce here in London. And I think that it's, you know, again, it's like it's using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I don't know what that, you know, I don't speak Spanish, but I'm sure there's a phrase that's similar in Spanish of using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I also think it's important to remember that we're going into autumn and winter. Okay, we've had a summer where we've had a pandemic, and certain people who have gardens have been able to be outside in their gardens. They've been able to, you know, enjoy being outdoors. But what is going to happen if you're working from home and the sun sets at 2:30 and it's cold and it's rainy and you're moving from your bed to your sofa to your desk and back to your sofa and then to your bed, and you're doing that over and over and over for 6 months, and you can't go into the garden because it's cold and it's dark and it's rainy. And this is why places like pubs, bars, restaurants, grassroots live music venues thrive, because that cultural offering allows us to get out and to be with other people, particularly in the wettest and darkest months in this country. And I think we are, you know, we're sitting on a potential sort of mental health disaster as well, if we're just encouraging people to carry on, you know, working from home and not allowing them to go out and not allowing them to express themselves and to be with other people in COVID secure and COVID safe cultural environments. So I don't know if anybody has any reflections on that.
I wanna add something. It's just a little thing that I was reading. The number of in some brand, Amazon, whatever, the peak of selling musical instruments and equipment, plugins, keyboards, is been so high lately with the pandemic. Is because basically musicians are in panic, so they feel they have to have a studio to work at home. And all that, no. So this is just like what is happening of what Amy's saying in the musician's life. So everyone is like getting the few dollars that they have from government and just investing it in something that they think it will give back something. But the reality is, like, if you don't have the skill to be a sound engineer, if you don't have experience, if you won't get it now like that, you know. And not because you buy all those things, it's because, do you know what I mean? Like, the mental health is already playing a part here, I think, because people is just going like, wow, what we're gonna do? So imagine the pandemic, that the instruments are selling much more and no one is playing, and you say like, why is that, you know?
In every crisis there's opportunity. That's probably a very unpopular thing to say, but it is true. Okay, so to pick up Andy's thing, venues are currently operating at 31% capacity, and we're seeing numbers of venues in London that are opening are going to increase in October. So I would say to all the promoters of Latin music in London, if you have an artist that could sell out 300, 400, 500 capacity shows, what you need to do is find 3 shows they can play at 3 places across London, 100 capacity each. You've now got 3 gigs instead of 1. And if we can get a financially viable model for that, that's actually better for the artists. They can go and earn 3 times the amount of money that they were previously earning. So it's about getting that right. I'd also say that on a positive note, but let's try and end with optimism. Okay, one thing I think this crisis has really reminded people is exactly what Amy's just described there. Life is not about your 9-to-5 office job. It's about your enjoyment of culture and creativity and social activity with others. That's, you know, I think we're going to emerge from this crisis with people giving real value to the kind of experiences that Ernesto and other musicians bring to their lives. I think we might finally be able to have a conversation with people about the actual financial value of that, and the social value of that, and the cultural value of it, and why it's important in places like London and right the way across the country. Amy's absolutely right. We're heading towards a mental health disaster here, but there's enough enthusiasm, certainly within our sector, to get on top of that and give people the opportunities back. We need the financial support to do it. We need brands and sponsors. Frankly, we're talking about promotions and promoters. We need brands and sponsors to think entirely differently. You can't sponsor the O2 Arena right now. Okay, there's a message for O2. There's no point. You can't make the O2 Arena work, but you know what? You could sponsor 18 gigs across London for every night you're currently sponsoring the O2, and you could get a number of people into each of those gigs, and you could help with that, and you can really you could restructure everything. Ernesto's example of the rain coming down, hitting everybody at the top and not dripping through the bottom. Actually, this crisis is an opportunity to look at that whole mechanism and say, you know what really needs to happen? We need activity and culture and social engagement in every part of our communities across London. We need Latin musicians, not just in the places we all know they already are. We don't just need them in Seven Sisters. We need them in Camden. We need more stuff happening at the Spiritual Bar. We need them in out of the way places. What about over at the Fighting Cocks? What about all these places? What about over in Walthamstow? Let's set up some great events. Maybe they don't attract the same number of people they did, but they can't anyway. So as far as our sector is concerned, we want to get people back to work. We want to really take this opportunity to remind them of why things are important to them and what it means to them. And the best way to do that is to get the activities back up and running. So give us the support to do that. Let's talk to the brands. Let's talk to the sponsors. Let's talk to the public funders and just say, look, okay, music's coming back in a limited capacity. That's fine for us. It won't be the same. And eventually, personally, I'm looking forward to crowd surfing across the 100 Club, hopefully held up by Ernesto, Tom, and you, Andy, and I might.
I've got your ankles.
That's what I love about live music. But let's not miss the opportunity here. The opportunity is here. I mean, I would love to see Latin. You know how enthusiastic I am about Latin music, Andy. I'd love to see that springing up all the way across London, maybe in front of only 20 or 30 people. But let's get these musicians back to work. Let's get promoters back working. Let's just find a way to make things work in the interim, Yeah.
Great. Well, question I wanted to ask, because it's all been very positive, which is great. And I'm just wondering how we can support you from the Latin music side in terms of, as individual musicians, promoters, how we can support the campaigns that you're involved in, how we can add our voices to your voices in terms of looking after our sector within the bigger sector. I mean, what can we do?
I think from our perspective, we've been involved in a number of sort of campaigns that have been going on throughout this year. There was a Let the Music Play campaign in July, which was a great example of the industry as a whole coming together and speaking with one voice in support of the sector, and that had a very tangential impact. I think social media has been proved to be very powerful, I think, at this time, and getting the support. So I think keeping in touch with UK Music Venue Trust, and our wider members and the kind of campaigns that we've got involved, because I think they're a government with a big majority. So in normal times, I think they can probably get away with a lot, but they are very susceptible to public opinion changing, and I think that can be very well articulated on social media and more broadly. So I think keep in touch with our what we're sort of the messaging that we're putting out, and I think if echoing that, supporting that in kind of creative ways. And I think we'd love to work with you more closely in order to kind of take that forward and think of some initiatives that we can kind of develop in the coming months.
Great.
I can jump in here and say, you know, from the perspective of myself and the Mayor of London, you know, it's London's diversity and vibrancy that makes it the best place in the world to go out at night pre-COVID. And we're going to carry on with that spirit with COVID. And it's really important that the Latin music scene is able to flourish, all of the support that it needs. So I would really urge anyone listening and watching to access those resources. They're there for you and for your businesses. And if anyone does want to get in touch with me directly about something, or you're getting stuck, or you need help, you can email me night@london.gov.uk. And just to sort of, you know, amplify the, if you could amplify the, you know, the calls that we're making to government to say, you know, we need a reopening plan, we need support, we need sector specific support. I think that the more we work together, the louder our voices are, and the more effective they are in getting change made.
Yeah, great.
Just to echo all of that, I'd say the activity, the artist activists, you know, everybody involved in the Latin music scene has a role to play in just simply amplifying everything and making demands, frankly. You know, tell people you want to get back to work. We're hoping to publish a list of venues that will be opening up in October, and people should be getting in touch with those and saying, look, I've got an idea for a night. We want to help you be open. That's where we want to go with it.
Yeah. Ernesto, any last thoughts from you?
Well, I don't know. I think being very positive and talking from an artistic point of view, I think it's also good that it's when this is with this bunch of musicians are gonna go and play. They're gonna be more prepared, more practiced. They're gonna be a lot of it's going to be a lot of new ideas and new recordings that they have been working during this whole period. That is also a good thing. It's gonna be a boom of, it's gonna be a baby boom of music, you know, like it's gonna be like that, because we have been recording for big labels and for small labels, for friends, so it's gonna be a lot of music around to present. So that is also a nice opportunity. And also I wanted to say, like, even though we sometimes criticize and even though we sometimes are a little bit worried and blah, blah, I would say, like, here is one of the best places to be in this pandemic, being an artist, because I have a lot of friends in Europe, and I'm not gonna even go to South America, because we all know, but you know, it's actually, it's not that bad. So I think Mark and Amy and Tom and you, Andy, you're very right in the sense of, you know, we have to work together. And also I like that about Mark saying, you know, just go to the venue, say like, listen, let's work out this, let's do this, you know, we can do a gig with less people. We, you know, I think it's gonna bring changes, and not all of them are gonna be negative, definitely. You know.
Yeah. Great. Thank you all so much. It's been a really good, really positive opening to the conference. Thank you, and see you all on the other side.